All right, so there have been a couple of important political developments here in the last couple days, and I think chief among them was Newt Gingrich, announcing he's running for president, and then immediately coming out and saying that he thinks the Paul Ryan plan for Medicare is radical right-wing social engineering, and that America's not ready for it. And then as soon as these comments aired, people were like, "Oh my gosh, he's contradicting Paul Ryan and the House Republicans." And then there's a video clip online of a guy who walked up to Gingrich and shook his hand and said that what he did to Paul Ryan by undermining him was unforgivable, and that he should just leave now before he embarrasses himself any further. And then of course came the apology. Newt Gingrich called and apologized to Paul Ryan for stepping on his toes. And, really I feel as though Gingrich was on the side of popular opinion, and that's that, cutting some benefits to Medicare, I think some people could probably get on board with that. I think, once we end subsidies for big oil, and a lot of these agricultural subsidies, which I don't get. Agricultural subsidies piss me off because I feel as though we're paying farmers for, corn. So we make, corn prices unrealistically cheap, which drives, us to use corn and, raising cattle, which makes, keeps the price of meat artificially low. And for people who don't know, farming meat is a really inefficient way to use grain. Not to mention the fact that it, increases our greenhouse gas emissions. But anyways, agricultural subsidies and farming is something else. But we should probably be subsidizing stuff like, lettuce, tomatoes, stuff that's healthy instead of stuff that clogs your arteries if you eat it in, mass consumption, which most Americans do. But anyways, I feel like people could accept some Medicare cuts if we, repealed, subsidies for oil companies, the most profitable industry in the history of the planet, and we're giving them money. When I see an industry earning record profits, tens of billions of dollars a year in profit, and yet I'm paying $4 at the pump for gas. How about an oil subsidy? If you want to make gas cheaper, go ahead and use those subsidies to knock off some federal and state taxes on gas. I mean that would truly help the working people. Industries that are making tens of billions of dollars a year don't need our $4 billion a year to help them with research and development. I mean, I see this as a popular sort of line, is that, well, that money's there so that we can help them find more gas. As long as gas is trading at $100 a barrel and they're able to charge $4 a gallon, they will find where the gas is. It's not going to be a problem. They don't need that extra money in their back pockets. And some people say, well, if we cut the subsidies, then oil companies will, raise prices to keep their profit margins intact. And then I say, let's regulate the fuck out of these people. I mean, why is it that they can't survive on, $4 billion a year less in profits? I mean, they're not hurting. I've never once driven past a gas station and thought, I bet the executives at Chevron are really in a jam. And that's because they're not. I mean, the entire industry earns billions of dollars. I can understand if, we're talking about solar or wind or hydro, where it's like, these are not very profitable forms of energy, namely because they don't have the scale in a lot of these places. Similar problems with nuclear. Nuclear, there's so much liability attached, and, cost and designs and overruns that, okay, for these, renewable sources of energy that are a whole lot less toxic on our environment and leave us less open to, foreign pressures, then I understand subsidizing those. And there was an argument made on Real Time with Bill Maher this past weekend, that, we should cut all subsidies for all energy. And all energy sources are not created alike. There are those that we have to literally remove the tops of mountains to get to. That's coal. Forms that, when we burn them, cause acid rain and, great ecological disaster. Coal. Those we have to drill at, 8 to 10,000 feet under the sea floor for. That would be oil. And then there are those kinds that are relatively harmless on our environment. Now, a friend of mine pointed out, hundreds of people died in, putting up wind turbines and in the wind industry. And I'm not saying that these are 100% safe jobs. But what I'm saying is, I've never heard of like a wind turbine having problems and devastating an entire region's ecology. Anybody ever hear of solar panels going crazy and, killing hundreds of people? Truth is that they're not equivalent. And I understand the argument that coal and oil are here to stay because they provide our energy. I mean, it would be hard to meet our energy demands without those. Absolutely. But we shouldn't be subsidizing them. I mean, if you're making billions of dollars a year, you don't need our help. Especially when we're trying to, Republicans are all about, we're trying to bring the deficit back in line and trying to get our, budget in order. And the truth is that if that's our priority, then it's very hypocritical. There are some people a month back were arguing for, the stripping of all funds for Planned Parenthood, who don't take nearly as much money as oil subsidies, but provide healthcare services that would be much more expensive if we were looking at private doctors and hospitals and healthcare providers. And so, it doesn't break down to budget. Let's just be very clear about that with Republicans. It breaks down to ideology. They are so big business that they believe that's fine, that you should be subsidizing big oil companies. And they're okay with that. And that's an okay position to take. But just don't shroud, your entire political party's agenda and, creating jobs and bringing the deficit under control. If you were worried about the deficit, you would not be giving money to people who are already making billions of dollars and would be making billions of dollars. I can understand if it was like, if we take away the subsidies, the oil companies will now be operating at a loss and they won't be incentivized to provide our energy. Then okay, I can understand that. But they're still going to earn tens of billions of dollars a year in profit without our $4 billion in subsidies. So it pisses me off. And so that kind of brings me to the other thing, which was I already mentioned the Newt Gingrich. Whenever you hear anybody talking about the Paul Ryan plan, and they try to tell you that healthcare coverage for seniors won't be affected, they are flat out lying. It's not a miscalculation. It's not this sort of gray area. If somebody talks to you about the Paul Ryan plan, or moving to a voucher program for Medicare, or what's some of the buzzwords they'd use? Keeping Medicare around for the next generation. Ask them what they mean. And then ask a follow-up question. Well, what happens when that voucher runs out? Under this system, for those people who probably, the vast majority of my friends are probably not in the Medicare demographic and may not be concerned about it now. But basically, our current system is that you pay into Medicare your entire life. When you're working and you see that little money coming out from Medicare and Social Security, you're paying into these systems. And the whole idea behind them is that they're guaranteed benefits. And so how Medicare works now is that, somebody who's 65 has been paying in their whole life, and there's been the expectation that they're going to get guaranteed benefits. And that means that shit just gets covered. I mean, that's how it works with Medicare. People like to slam Medicare as, government entitlements, but they get shit done a lot more efficiently in health cost consciously than a lot of private insurance. And a lot of times they cover people that private insurance wouldn't cover. And so, whenever anybody talks about a voucher, what they're talking about is moving from guaranteed benefits to saying, you get $15,000 a year. And we really hope you don't go over that, because if you do, you're on the hook for it. And so for, a 70-year-old with diabetes and cataracts and liver failure and, somebody who's using home health care, they're going to blow through a voucher like it's nothing. I mean, people were talking about, nursing home coverage, etc. That's going to go by in the flash of an eye. Just gone. And then they're going to be on the hook for that. And so it's important to, whenever anybody is like, oh, I support the Paul Ryan plan, make sure they understand what they're talking about. Because I have family who's approaching, that 50-year mark, where if the Paul Ryan plan was implemented and they got sick after they turned 65, they'd be kind of screwed. And so it's important to look at reform and say, yes, we need to reform Medicare because it's not, fiscally solvent as it is now. But we also need to look at, why isn't it solvent? Are we spending tax money on other things like oil subsidies and ag subsidies? And so it's just, it makes me angry whenever I hear people who want to make it as simple as, we're making Medicare solvent. Yeah, but what are you doing to Medicare beneficiaries? Are you screwing them? How much worse are they going to be off under your plan than the current plan? And with the voucher program, the answer is a lot of them would be a whole lot worse off. So, yeah, I called Newt Gingrich a coward because he spoke the truth for about 24 hours and then he apologized for it. And then, Paul Ryan issued a statement and said, well, I think Newt Gingrich really understands, how he was wrong and how his statement was ineffective for the discussion. And it's like, you smug son of a bitch. Like, Paul Ryan really believes, and on the most part, he's probably right, that he's created this new plan, and however unpopular it is, the Republicans are running with it. And I think in the next year, the important thing is going to be for Democrats to hang it around the neck of Republicans, because they've sticked out this area where they are, for oil subsidies, for reforming Medicare into a voucher program, and the base of the GOP is so radicalized now that they can't run for office without agreeing with those positions. But there's no way in hell they're going to win, the independents or, moderates or even, blue dog Democrats. There's no way. I mean, if you explain a Medicare voucher program to people, say anybody who's between 45 and, 55, which is like the affected age range, if this were to go into effect, they tell you to fuck off and die. I mean, literally. There was this huge uproar over Medicare taking $500 billion away under Obamacare. And it's like, Republicans want to pretty much take it all away. So, anyways, that's it for now. Talk to you guys later.